Have you ever had meddling in-laws? The kind who can't resist poking their noses into your business, offering unsolicited advice, and generally making your life a living hell? Well, let me tell you, I've been there, and it's no picnic. But what happens when you decide it's time to turn the tables on those meddling in-laws? Allow me to take you on a roller coaster ride through a tale of revenge, redemption, and rekindled love. It all began with a simple vow renewal ceremony, a seemingly innocent gesture to celebrate our love and commitment. Little did we know that it would set the stage for an elaborate plan to teach our in-laws a lesson they'd never forget. With every part of the story, you'll discover the intricacies of our revenge plot, the unexpected twists, and the moments of redemption that changed everything. So buckle up, dear readers, as I recount the story of how we packed our bags, handed over the house papers, and embarked on a journey that would forever alter the dynamics of our family. Intrigued? Well, watch the video to the end, because this story is about to unfold in all its glory. It all started when my in-laws decided they wanted me out of their daughter's life, pronto. But little did they know, I had a plan up my sleeve that would not only secure my place in their hearts, or not, but also have them second-guessing their brilliant idea. First, let's meet the cast of characters. There's me, Kevin, with a knack for turning the tables, and there's my wife, Jane, the love of my life. Then, of course, we have the antagonists of our story, my in-laws, John and Mary, who have made it their mission to rescue their dear daughter from my clutches. Let me regale you with the tale of how my relationship with my wife's parents went from mildly awkward to a full-blown sitcom, complete with scandals and intrigues. Hold on to your hats. It's going to be a bumpy ride. My journey into the labyrinth of in-law relationships began when I married the love of my life, Jane. Our whirlwind romance had been a fairy tale until I met her parents. I didn't realize it then, but they would turn our lives into a never-ending circus act. Meet Jane's father, John. He's the quintessential dad joke king, with a collection of puns that could make a stand-up comedian jealous. However, it's not just the puns, it's the timing. Picture this, Jane and I, dressed to the nines, ready for a romantic dinner, and out of nowhere, he'd chime in with a pun about forks, sending us into fits of laughter. "John, how do you come up with these?" I'd ask, genuinely baffled. He'd grin and reply, "It's all about being well-rounded." But it wasn't just the jokes, it was his obsession with antique cars. He had a knack for spotting rusty relics on the side of the road and insisting that he could restore them to their former glory. Jane and I had lost count of the number of weekends spent in oil-stained garages, surrounded by half-assembled engines and the distinct scent of motor oil. Then there's Jane's mother, Mary, the eternal optimist with a dash of eccentricity. She had an uncanny ability to turn any situation into a heartwarming Hallmark movie script. Once, we got caught in a torrential downpour during a picnic. While Jane and I tried to salvage the soggy sandwiches, Mary declared, "This is just like one of those romantic rain scenes in movies." "Mary," I said, holding a dripping PB&J, "I think they have umbrellas in those scenes." But the piece de resistance was her obsession with knitting. She was convinced that knitting could solve all of life's problems. Stubbed your toe? Knit a cozy for it. Lost your keys? Knit a keychain. She once spent an entire weekend knitting emotional support scarves for us, just in case we ever felt the need for an extra dose of comfort. As you can imagine, our interactions led to a fair share of misunderstandings and mishaps. John once decided to surprise us with an improved front lawn by planting a mini forest of cacti. Yes, you read that correctly. Cacti in our suburban front yard. "John," I sighed, "our neighbors are going to love this." He winked and said, "It's low maintenance, son, and a great conversation starter." Mary, on the other hand, was convinced that I had a hidden talent for knitting. So, she roped me into attending a knitting class with her. Picture me, surrounded by grandmas knitting sweaters for their cats, desperately trying to make sense of knitting needles and yarn. It was an experience, to say the least. Our relationship with the in-laws became increasingly strained. Every visit felt like an expedition into the unknown. John insisted on helping with household chores, which typically ended with him vacuuming the curtains and Jane and me trying to suppress our laughter. Mary, on the other hand, saw our home as a blank canvas for her crafting experiments, with glitter and glue making their way into every crevice. But the real trouble started when they decided that our love life needed a boost. Mary gifted us a book titled Passion Unleashed: Reignite the Fire. The cover featured a shirtless man holding a rose between his teeth. John, of course, couldn't resist adding his touch, a sticky note on the cover that read, "Read this with candles." I turned to Jane, exasperated, and said, "Your parents are trying to turn our bedroom into a shrine of passion." Our home had become a battleground of quirks and eccentricities. But little did we know that the climax of this sitcom was yet to come. One fateful evening, we returned home to find our living room transformed into what can only be described as a psychedelic knitting paradise. There were neon yarns hanging from the ceiling, hand-knit cushions strewn everywhere, and, in the center of it all, Mary sat with a giant ball of multicolored yarn. "Surprise!" she exclaimed. "I call it the knitplosion." I blinked, unable to comprehend the chaos. Jane, my partner in navigating this absurdity, whispered, "We need to do something before they turn our lives into a reality show." And so, we devised a cunning plan. We invited them over for a family meeting, where we gently explained that, while we loved their quirks, it was time for some boundaries. "We appreciate your creativity, but our living room isn't a canvas for artistic expression," I said. John nodded. "And I promise to keep my cacti in my own yard." Mary sighed. "I suppose I can knit less." Aggressively. Our relationships were saved from becoming a full-blown soap opera, but we couldn't help but wonder what scandal or intrigue the in-laws would unleash next. One thing was certain. Life with them was anything but dull. As I recount these tales, I can't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. In-laws can be a handful, but they also bring a unique flavor to life. After all, what's a good sitcom without a cast of quirky characters? But back to my story, our main dish. So, here's how it all went down. My in-laws invited us over for what they claimed was a family meeting. Red flag right there, am I right? I knew it was going to be an ambush, but I decided to play along. As we settled into their posh living room, John cleared his throat, wearing an expression that screamed, "I'm about to drop a bomb on you." "Listen, son," he began. "We've been discussing Jane's future, and we think it's best if you two take a break." I raised an eyebrow. "A break? You mean like a vacation?" Mary chimed in, her face as stern as a school principal's. "No, we mean a breakup. We believe it's for the best." I thought I'd misheard them for a second. A breakup? Really? But then it hit me. This was my golden opportunity. I nodded solemnly, pretending to be defeated. "I see. If that's what you think is best for Jane." Little did they know, I had an ace up my sleeve that would leave them speechless. As we left their house that evening, I made a quick stop at my attorney's office. You see, I had been preparing for this moment for months. I had discreetly bought a house in Jane's name and made her the sole owner without her knowledge. The next day, I sat Jane down for a heart-to-heart talk. I feigned sorrow, telling her that her parents' wishes had finally gotten to me, and I agreed to the breakup. But what I didn't tell her was that I had a little parting gift for my dear in-laws. As we met with them to break the news, John and Mary looked triumphant. "We're glad you finally see reason," John said with a smug grin. I nodded, fighting back a smirk. "Yes, we'll be going our separate ways, just as you wanted. But before we do, I have something for you." And that's when I handed over the house papers to my wife, effectively making her the sole owner of the beautiful house I had bought. Jane's eyes widened in surprise as she realized what had just happened. The expressions on my in-laws' faces were priceless. Shock, disbelief, and a dash of regret danced across their features. "Consider it a parting gift," I said with a wink. "You wanted us to break up, after all." The room fell into a stunned silence. My in-laws were left speechless, and I couldn't have been happier. Revenge was served, and it was delicious. Alright folks, time for continuation of this epic saga of revenge. If you thought things were spicy before, just wait until you hear what happened next. So there we were, my wife Jane and I, with the house papers officially transferred into her name. The look on my in-laws' faces was a mix of shock, anger, and sheer disbelief. It was the kind of satisfaction you can't put a price on, but I wasn't done with my grand plan just yet. As we bid farewell to John and Mary, Jane and I moved into the new house. Now, let me tell you, it was a beauty. A charming two-story home with a lush garden and a cozy fireplace. It was the perfect place for us to start our separate lives. But here's the kicker. I had secretly arranged for a housewarming party, and I was about to invite every nosy neighbor, friend, and distant relative we had. The plan was simple yet devious. We were going to act like the perfect couple, showering each other with affection and acting as if our breakup was just a minor hiccup in our love story. The invitations went out, and our guests arrived one by one. Jane and I put on quite the show, holding hands, whispering sweet nothings, and basically pretending we were still head over heels in love. I even went all out with a surprise gift for Jane during the party, a framed picture of us from our happiest moments together. As the evening went on, I could see my in-laws growing increasingly uncomfortable. They had expected me to slink away quietly, not throw a lavish housewarming party with Jane. Oh, the irony. The pièce de résistance came when I made a toast to our new beginning. I spoke about our undying love, our unbreakable bond, and how this house symbolized the fresh start we both needed. I could practically see the steam coming out of John's ears as he forced a smile. But the real twist came when I announced that Jane and I had decided to renew our vows right then and there, in front of all our guests. Jane looked at me in surprise, but I could see the spark of mischief in her eyes. She nodded, playing along with the plan. We improvised vows on the spot, promising to love and cherish each other forever. The guests cheered, and my in-laws were left utterly flabbergasted. They couldn't believe their eyes. Their grand plan to break us up had backfired spectacularly. As the night wore on and the party continued, I could see John and Mary slowly slipping away, their spirits crushed. It was a sweet, sweet victory, and revenge had never tasted so good. After our unforgettable housewarming party and vow renewal, my in-laws, John and Mary, were in shambles. It was clear that their scheme to break up Jane and me had fallen apart in the most spectacular fashion. But little did we know that they weren't going to give up so easily. Oh no, they had another card up their sleeves, and they played it like seasoned poker champions. A few weeks after our grand celebration, Jane and I started receiving invitations in the mail. They were for family counseling sessions with a renowned therapist in town. Apparently, my in-laws had taken it upon themselves to book these sessions for us, thinking they could fix our marriage. Now, I'm all for therapy and working on relationships, but this was just another one of their manipulative tactics. They hoped that by forcing us into counseling, they could control the narrative and push us towards divorce. But Jane and I were not about to be pawns in their game. We decided to attend these sessions, but with a plan of our own. We were going to be the model couple, the epitome of love and reconciliation. We'd show the therapist that we were committed to making our marriage work, even though it was all a charade. The first session was awkward, to say the least. We sat in that therapist's office, holding hands and sharing stories about our struggles. Jane shed a few tears for good measure, and I gave her a comforting pat on the back. The therapist, Dr. Caldwell, seemed genuinely invested in our well-being. He gave us advice on communication, trust building, and the importance of spending quality time together. Little did he know that we were following a script written by my in-laws. As the sessions continued, we played our parts to perfection. We laughed together, shared our innermost thoughts, and even went on a weekend getaway that we had no intention of enjoying. Our acting skills were top-notch, and Dr. Caldwell was eating it up. But then came the bombshell. During one particularly emotional session, Jane tearfully confessed that she had been having an affair. She looked at me with remorse in her eyes, and I put on a show of shock and heartbreak. The therapist was taken aback, and my in-laws must have thought they had finally won. However, our plan was about to take an unexpected turn. I decided to confess as well, revealing that I too had been unfaithful. The therapist was now in uncharted territory, faced with a couple who had both strayed but were willing to forgive each other. We spun a tale of forgiveness, redemption, and renewed commitment. Dr. Caldwell was baffled, but he couldn't argue with a couple who claimed to have found their way back to each other through forgiveness. As we left the session that day, I couldn't help but smirk. My in-laws' plan had backfired once again. Instead of tearing us apart, it had brought us closer together. And the look on their faces when we shared the good news was priceless. After our bombshell confessions at the therapy session, Jane and I continued our charade of reconciliation. We played the roles of a couple on the path to forgiveness and healing. Dr. Caldwell, our unwitting therapist, had no idea that we were manipulating the situation to our advantage. Our plan was simple yet diabolical. We would continue to act as the perfect couple, lulling my in-laws into a false sense of security. They must have thought they had won, that their meddling had finally pushed us over the edge. But we had a few tricks up our sleeves. We began dropping hints about a surprise we had in store for them, something that would prove our commitment to each other and silence their doubts once and for all. Curiosity got the better of them, and they couldn't resist asking about our mysterious surprise. With exaggerated enthusiasm, we told them that we were renewing our wedding vows, and we wanted them to be there to witness our recommitment to each other. Their expressions were priceless, a mixture of shock, guilt, and confusion. They had expected us to crumble under the weight of their interference, not come back stronger than ever, but they had no choice but to accept our invitation to the vow renewal ceremony. We spared no expense in planning the event. It was a lavish affair, held in a picturesque garden with flowers, music, and a guest list that included our closest friends and family. My in-laws had no idea what they were walking into. As we stood before our loved ones, Jane and I exchanged heartfelt vows, pledging our love, trust, and loyalty to each other. We spoke of forgiveness and the strength we had found in each other's arms. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. But the pièce de résistance was yet to come. After we exchanged rings, we made a surprise announcement. We revealed that we had decided to sell our house, the very house my in-laws had pressured us to leave. Their expressions shifted from confusion to shock as we explained that we were using the proceeds to embark on a year-long adventure together, traveling the world. We had turned the tables on them once and for all. The house they had tried to take from us was now funding our dream journey, and they were left speechless. As the ceremony concluded, my in-laws approached us, their faces pale. They tried to speak, but the words escaped them. It was the sweet taste of victory. However, the importunity of my meddling in-laws has not gone away, so I had to go the ingenious move that ensured they would never interfere in our lives again. After our extravagant vow renewal ceremony, my in-laws were a wreck. They had witnessed our love and commitment firsthand, and they knew they couldn't meddle in our lives any longer without facing severe consequences. But we couldn't rely solely on their newfound guilt. The day after the ceremony, Jane and I presented them with a surprise gift, an all-expenses-paid vacation to a remote cabin in the woods. We explained that it was our way of thanking them for their support and understanding during our challenging times. They were initially hesitant, suspicious of our motives, but we insisted it was a genuine gesture of gratitude. We assured them that we had put the past behind us and were ready to move forward with a clean slate. They reluctantly accepted the gift and embarked on their getaway, leaving us with an empty house to prepare for our year-long adventure. Little did they know that this cabin was strategically chosen. It was hours away from any cellular reception or internet access, effectively cutting them off from the outside world. As they settled into their isolated retreat, we sent occasional messages, asking if they were enjoying their vacation and assuring them that we were having a fantastic time planning our travels. Their replies grew less frequent as they immersed themselves in the peaceful surroundings, blissfully unaware of our ultimate plan. A week into their vacation, we received a message from them, admitting that they had realized the error of their ways and regretted their past interference. They confessed that they were now committed to giving us the space and privacy we deserved. It was the moment we had been waiting for. We replied with warmth and forgiveness, telling them that we appreciated their honesty and were willing to move past the past, just as we had promised during our vow renewal. They were overjoyed by our response and expressed their eagerness to make amends. And then, we dropped the bombshell. We explained that our year-long adventure was, in fact, a solo journey, just Jane and me. We told them that it was an opportunity for us to strengthen our bond and reconnect without any external distractions. Their shock was palpable through their messages. They couldn't believe that we had excluded them from our plans after everything they had done. But we reminded them of their newfound commitment to respecting our boundaries and assured them that we would return to them after our journey. As days turned into weeks, my in-laws remained isolated in their cabin, stewing in their realization that they had been outsmarted. We, on the other hand, embarked on the adventure of a lifetime, traveling the world, strengthening our relationship, and creating unforgettable memories. By the time we returned, my in-laws had undergone a transformation. They had reflected on their actions and genuinely changed for the better. They welcomed us home with open arms, ready to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of respect and understanding. And so, dear friends, we conclude our revenge tale with a twist of redemption. My in-laws learned the hard way that meddling in others' lives comes with consequences, but they also learned the value of respecting boundaries and cherishing the bonds of family. As for Jane and me, we emerged from this ordeal stronger than ever, with a newfound appreciation for the power of love, forgiveness, and a well-executed revenge plan. We hope our story serves as a lesson to all those who dare to meddle. Sometimes the tables can turn in the most unexpected and satisfying ways. Thank you for joining us on this wild journey, and may your own lives be free of meddling in-laws and filled with love and adventure.